Every time. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
How are you? Is it sunny over there? It's fine over here.
No, it's bright, but it's cloudy, not much sun. No.
Oh, thank God. As lockdown is releasing, I'm still laughing at people venturing out to the pub in like snow weather conditions. If that was you, good on you. That was dedication. Well, I'm just going to have my cup of tea right now. So yeah, that's sort of like as far as I'm going. But good morning. We are going to be talking about personal versus business PR. And I know, Karen, you and I have talked about this like years ago. When we both set up as entities, like a business. But obviously now is the way of the personal brand that comes through. And I think that a lot of people are getting confused from some of the conversations that I'm having of well, sort of like which one to do and sort of like understanding what each one means. But then also when it comes to their promotion, even if you were a business, you're now being asked to step up, tell your brand story, be more visible. We want to see the faces behind. So at some point, when you're going through like even what content or sort of what PR opportunities there are, I think it can be quite confusing. So we wanted to get that straight.
Yeah, there definitely is. It's sort of like a lot of crossover, especially when you're your own business.
Yes.
And I remember way back when there was two of us, it was always the question on social media, what profile picture do you use? Wasn't it? So yeah. It was sort of like, do you put your logo or do you put your face? And there was always this ongoing argument, wasn't there, as to which one you should use.
What do you use now? Like I use my face.
Well, now actually. I use my face.
Yeah, it's moved, hasn't it? It's evolved.
But then there's only me, there's only me in the business. The people I work with are associates. So it was different when there was me and another business partner.
Yeah.
It couldn't just be seen as going out just as me because there was two of us in the business. So in that case, we used the logo. But now that it's me, it just makes sense to do that. And then put, maybe on any images or anything like that, and on your banners and stuff like that, then use your logo in that way.
Yeah, because I think as well, you and I both came from like corporate background. So if you come from a corporate background or from a sort of more of a business field, sort of setting up your business, you probably have that in your mindset, don't you? And I've noticed that. I know I did. I put my logo up there. It was always we instead of I, how you're talking, how you're positioning yourself. And I still go in between because as far as I'm concerned, my associates are so like-minded. That's why they're associates. And so from that point, there are times where I will be talking as we, but there'll be other times where it's like, no, this is specifically me. This is what I'm thinking. So but again, when I'm looking, I was having a conversation with somebody about social media and they were like, I'm just so busy. I just, trying to think of all the things of like how to get myself in front of the camera. And it was exhausting, like listening. So from my point of view, I thought, okay, let's have this discussion about personal PR and branding, like business PR. Like if you're putting yourself out there and trying to build your reputation, that word of mouth, like as far as I'm concerned, there could be a nice balance between the two. Or some people I know, they'll push one area more than the other. So again, if there is a team of you, you might want to talk more about the brand, and that's when it makes sense. But then you're also putting other faces around that. It could be that you have a brilliant person within your team that instead of you doing all of the PR and tiring yourself up, or even all the social, I do feel this conversation will be PR and social, but it will be, I think, beneficial just to sit down, strip it back, let's have a conversation and a cuppa, of course, and go through sort of like the steps of how really to do it best, that works best for you. Because the other thing that came up, and I thought this was quite interesting to hear, and it made me really think about sort of like the pressures that we have as business owners, but somebody actually he flagged up, well, actually, what about my mental health? Because actually I'm not in a state. And actually we talk about consistency, and if you're going to do something, you're going to have to do it consistently. If your mental health isn't in the best place, or you're not able to be that consistent, there are other ways to factor that in.
I think that's a really interesting one, because obviously I know a lot of people who they've sort of suffered anxiety, not just over COVID, but we might do anyway, or have times when business is not going so well and they don't feel like putting themselves out there. And if they have been doing like videos and putting their, you know, oh, here's me out in the garden, or, you know, whatever, them, and they don't feel like that, like you say, it's not going to be consistent anymore. So yeah, so I'd be very keen as well to hear from you how you would kind of overcome that.
Yeah, and I think as well, there is the guilt that comes with the fact that if you haven't been that consistent, the guilt that you might feel. But I know I've seen people write the post afterwards going, I'm so sorry, I've been out of action because I've had to step away. And that's absolutely fine to talk about that. But, you know, again, does that make you more anxious to be that vulnerable? I mean, I personally feel that if you want to talk, I think the more that we're talking about mental health issues, the better. I feel that there's so much more that perhaps I would want to talk about, and I do. There are times where it's like I've not been on here because I've been doing XYZ, or I've just been too tired. So I'm happy to talk about it, and it doesn't really bother me. But that's taken me 10 years to be comfortable in my skin as a business owner, and not to give any flying what other people may think now. But I'm just, you know, that's a characteristic. That's not necessarily, you know, what people.
Yeah, and some people might not be comfortable being that vulnerable, you know, and I don't think you have to be, you know. I'm one of those. I don't like to be too much like that, you know. I maybe talk about it a little bit, but I wouldn't kind of just lay it all out, you know, or, you know, sort of wear my heart on my sleeve kind of thing out there and really put it out there. So, you know, that doesn't make me feel comfortable now, and I don't think everyone has to do that. No. And I think there is a bit of a pressure for people to do that, to be honest.
I think
get out there, speak your truth, speak what's really going on, get vulnerable. And I think that puts a pressure on people, because if people are not comfortable doing that, then it's an added burden. So I'd be keen to see if you've seen some examples about people, you know, how they can still show that vulnerability a bit, but not have to do it to the point where they're too vulnerable or feel pressure doing it.
Well, you know what? The first thing that I would do is, if you're looking at any marketing plan, like let's just strip it right back. If you're looking at any marketing plan, like I always think, what is your business plan? Like, what's going on in your business? Forget about you. Ooh, so excited, ripping off my earphones in the same sense. So what we'll do is we'll strip it back. What is going on in your business? And I just did a training session, funny enough, like a PR training session. And all of this took up the majority of the time before we even went into how to do PR. Wow. And this is the difference, because I genuinely sit there and go, and Janet Murray, again, a brilliant lady that I think I've learned so much from. And, you know, her podcast, although she's finishing up her podcast, so I was like, oh, but, you know, I've learned so much. But just even listening to that content, you know, when you're trying to build a content strategy and you've got nothing to say, that's not a problem with your content, that's a problem with your business, she says. And I think that's so true. We always sit there and go, right, what's going on in the business that we need to promote? So let's go back, let's look at the business. And usually we start with the branding as well, don't we? Like, you know, what it is, what are the values, what's the vision, what's the mission, personality, you know, what's
your purpose, what's your tone of voice.
And those values that we talk about, like those are things that we could talk about as, you know, sort of like story points, really. We also talk about the brand hero journey, don't we? We talk about, you know, what's the change, what's the so there's so much there already that actually isn't necessarily about you. It's about your direction. So it's almost a step back. And it's also what you do want to know, whatever happens, whoever you employ, if you grow, or if you're still a solopreneur, that's what you want to be known for, isn't it? So even if you just take it to that level and you start pinpointing the content, you can create that content all around it, but also those story points. For me, when you're delivering that service from a PR point of view, so from a social media point of view, that's all those content pillars are right there in that first instance. I think that I'll have to share a link. I always share this link, but there's a brilliant 10 content pillars of social media that you can follow. So remind me, Karen.
We'll add that on there. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, so we'll add that on there. But I thought that was a brilliant way to go through what are those content pillars that you could be talking about. Some of it gets a bit personal. It talks about your views, your person, you know, but it's about a subject. It's not necessarily about you. And that's where I think the difference between what opportunities are coming up that you feel might be more not exposing, but you know, you're being a bit more vulnerable. You know, your views to help someone is different to you saying, this is me, as in, you know, this is what I like to do in my spare time, PR me as this person. It's about an issue, and that's also what journalists will want to know in terms of, you know, what is the problem and what is the solution. So outside of your business, in that sense, you know, what's the problem out there that needs to be.
And I think just picking up on that as well, I mean, I do quite a lot of sharing my point of view. So I think it's sort of, this is my point of view on a subject, this is my opinion on a subject, you know, this is what I think about this, something that I'm passionate about or believe in or something. So for me, that's a bit more of what extension of where I maybe am a bit more vulnerable, because I'm putting out my point of view there. And there might be people who don't like it, and there might be people who do like it. They agree and disagree. So
yeah, and
there are different ways of doing it like that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think at that point, that is good for the business. If you're going to talk about which opportunities to choose from in terms of personal, putting yourself forward, I feel like, because like every company will have an approach to that solution. So your viewpoints will be really important to get across and promote. And if somebody is going to ask you for a comment, that is what you need to be. So if somebody's talking about, let's just say for small businesses, you know, the importance of being digital post-pandemic, during pandemic, and then Karen Black from HubFizz is talking about like what she's seen with her customers, that is not necessarily about you as a person and you know, very personal, you as an individual. That's more of you as a business owner. And so you see why that is more relevant for you to promote yourself. It's not about sort of your personal struggles and trials. That is very much like a next, you know, sort of like that's the step that you want to aim for in the first level, because that to me is where that's the important part of that comms story. And as we become more and more sort of like as we grow our audience, yeah, of course people want to see your face, they want to meet you at events, fingers crossed, even online, even offline. They want to be able to see you and get to know you, and they want to know the person behind you. So I think then what happens is that especially if you're doing your own PR, you might actually end up finding that you're going to see opportunities like, I want to hear from a business owner that struggled with family and pandemic. That's when it becomes more of a personal, you know, this is what's going on behind the scenes. You don't have to do those stories. This is not going to affect your business. But what I do see is that people will go, right, I'm going to do that because it's the BBC or it's, you know, some women's magazine that I really want to be part of, like, you know, a good magazine, like maybe Psychology's or Red. And I think, right, I'm going to be put on that and I want to be the case study. And that's me doing PR and that'll be me for my business. The truth is that whilst that's good for you to perhaps sometimes get the exposure, is that, my question would be, is this what helps you? Is this what's going to grow people and your audience for your business, or is this just a feature that you're part of?
Yeah, is it going to move your business forward? I think always sort of having a goal in mind, you know, this is your kind of your goal or your mission or your vision, and always looking at everything and going, does it tick all the boxes to make me move one step further towards that?
And also, we can't control 100% what the media are going to cover. So you might have had to, you might not know this, and hopefully if you're working with someone who's teaching you PR and showing you, you know, perhaps you're doing a course, perhaps you're doing this yourself, what we would do if we were looking after that client would be like, right, well, that's great that you're going to feature them, but is this a story that's related to how they then set up their business? That's what somebody experienced would be asking. And then it's like, but are you going to put that on there, or is it just going to be about this woman, you know, for example, talking about how they're struggling, and she just used as a case study? There is a big difference between the two, and then that's when the vulnerability comes in. Again, sometimes it's important to share that story. If, say, for example, lots of single mums out there have started businesses. Great story. You know, lots of women that have had barriers, perhaps getting a seat at the table, getting their voices heard, have now created businesses to help other women. Great story. So you do want to hear about those stories. But again, you can see where we're leading towards, but this is how I'm now helping others. That kind of feature.
Yeah, tying the business story into it, definitely.
The reason I'm going to say this is because sometimes I just came across somebody and my heart went out to them actually, but they'd obviously seen maybe, like, you can see things like hashtag journal requests, journalist needs this for their story, and they'll probably just go BBC, oh yeah, I'm going to jump on that, PR, and they jump on it, and it ended up talking about, you know, sort of like how they're coping during the pandemic, and it was about rising drinking. And the problem is now that the reason why you want to be careful and diligent is because if you're not protecting and is sort of like where you're being featured, when people are doing a Google search of your business, and if that is a higher ranking site, what comes up first? And if that wasn't anything to do with your business and that was to do with your brand name, and it's your name that we're talking about, and they might have just put in your job role or whatever it might be, then that's what's going to come up on your website search, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not good, is it? So your name or whatever, drinking more during COVID.
Just as an example, I'm sure she's going to figure it out. I'm sure absolutely she's going to figure it out. But it was just something that I just, you know, you're going to have to do a ton load of online now to try and bring that down. But then actually now it's BBC, you know, and it's like, oh, crikey. Okay. So I think that to me is the minefield, that when I've been having these conversations with people about personal or business branding, you know, absolutely, there's a reason why you want to have a personal brand. That is absolutely not a problem. Whether or not you are a personal or a business brand, at some point you're going to have to be a voice. You're going to have to be a spokesperson. Every big brand that I've worked with, it's always been the marketing director or the CEO. They have had to do their stories. They've had to be in trade press, haven't they? So, you know, that has happened. But now we're in an age where it's like, oh, let's meet the CEO, like, you know, let's meet that person, the business owner, you know, in their own home, or let's see them on holiday. You know, it's becoming a little bit more, you know, a little bit more inviting now, because that's, as consumers, there are these opportunities, there are these different platforms, and especially in the industry you're in, it's more of a community, it's more familial, so we want to get to know the person. But my question would be, ask yourself, what is this going to do for my business, and is this actually going to get me the results that I want? And if, for example, it is about the ins and outs of your business, because it does start a chain reaction. So once you start doing something, same with social, I would always say, I would, controversial from a PR, but you know, my marketing hat is on, I would always do your social first. Like, get your content pillars sorted, make sure that what you're communicating from your brand on your own channels is solid, so that for whatever reason, if you ended up, like, you know, being, you know, there's a quote that's been taken out of place. If anyone's visiting your website or your socials, they can see, okay, this is what this person's really about, or this is what they're putting out there. So that's wonderful. So you've got that backup.
And you've got those community to help you out if you ever do get in a sticky situation as well. People will jump in and help you out and defend what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Even if you just said, look, this is what was taken out of context. Like, again, this lady had so much support with her friends, but again, I think that it was just an example that I saw, and I think she did handle it well. She had a friend that was a PR that was like, no, it's okay. Actually reading into it a little bit more, it doesn't make you sound as bad at all, but it was this just context of. But again, it's like, that's the headline, and how many of us really go, let's read further? We were so quick, aren't we? We just perhaps grab the headlines, and in my opinion, it's like, was it worth it? You know, was it worth chasing that opportunity when there's so many others that you should?
That's a really good point, because I never sort of, you know, always sort of think about, how when people are searching for you, that's what's going to come up. So I think that's really, really a good tip for people to bear that in mind all the time, I think.
I mean, to be honest, I'm sure there was no tag in it. I'm sure, you know, I'm sure that it might not even be that big an issue. I haven't even, like, I don't know this woman, I haven't searched for her myself, but it is genuinely something that, you know, we're on the age of online now. So again, from PR opportunities, I'd be like, right, what is it that we want to promote? And also the good stuff, you want to make sure you're putting that back into your marketing, and you're talking about it. And like, I talk about this all the time, please put it back into your marketing so that you are promoting, like, you know, any good piece that's out there. But you do get edited out, and so that's why making sure that you protect your personal or your brand reputations is so important. But whatever you're saying, just be mindful of it, for sure. I was just going to say that the other thing that I wanted to go into was, a good example as well. Again, if you're a business, again, you might feel like, oh my God, I've just got to do so much as it is. And then to go chasing all of these opportunities, and then you get to a point where perhaps you're getting more reactive requests that come through. If you've got a really solid team around you, just sort of like bear in mind who it is that could perhaps do some of those requests. Because again, if it's something like a blog or a vlog, but as long as you've got your company name on there, again, it could be somebody that you're working with, a partner, if there's two of you, for example. It doesn't always have to be one person. Sometimes you often choose the person that's more sort of up for it, you know, willing to do these things, a bit more comfortable, and that makes sense. But equally, I feel that if there's more technical questions involved, like I've worked on brands where it's been the director of operations that would be the best person to speak to. The reason why I'm doing that is that, you know, if you're a small business but you're looking to scale, just bear that in mind with your scaling program, as in, right, okay, who it is that, you know, once I'm getting to that point where I've grown, who else is it that can help me with further promotions and comms? Because ultimately we need to see other faces behind here.
Yeah, I think that's something that's taken a long time. I mean, some businesses do it very well, but you know, getting the team involved in your sort of your marketing and that, rather than just having the marketing department just dealing with that. You know, often they don't get an input from everyone else in the business, do they?
No,
and I think
exactly.
just getting those points of view and getting people, you know, so if, for example, if there was someone in customer services who was really good at taking photos, we'll get them to do the photography for your social media, you know, and things like that.
Have a look at what assets and, you know, what skills the rest of the team have, exactly, so that you can bring that in.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, obviously, as sort of one-man business owners like that, we have to just do everything, don't we?
Or outsource, and we just sometimes don't have the money. So I think there's almost sort of like that growing scale. If you are that small business, I was just speaking to somebody actually, again, when I'm always asking for comments, like, you know, what's been your barrier, and you know, doing your own PR, and somebody just said, I'm just so worried about saying the wrong thing, like as a person, but for my company. And I thought that's a valid point. But equally, you know, that this is again where the branding comes in, because if you've already trained up your team so that they understand everything about you and your business and they're well versed to talk on your behalf, that's the joy of PR, is that, you know, you've actually got a solid team around you. Working with a really ambitious couple who are just awesome at integrating their entire team into their process. So they know from project to project, from start to finish, you know, their team is fully involved as to what's going on. They're involved in the planning, but it just means that they can delegate a hell of a lot easier. And even for perhaps PR or social media opportunities, if they couldn't do it, yes, they'll always try and be the face as the owners. But if it meant that, you know, maybe one of their team that's doing training needs to step up front, or maybe front of house, then they can step up as well, and they're comfortable. It's a personality thing, but again, it's just that scale up just to be aware of. But from a personal, and I think the one thing to remember, and something that's coming across from most PRs that I'm listening to, thankfully, because we're also hearing lots of people going, yes, PR yourself, get out there. But you know, the question, but you know, you hear some great other professionals that talk about visibility and mindset issues can come into it. And, you know, yes, that is a part of it. And again, it could take you a while to be comfortable in your own skin, and to be able to take on these opportunities with confidence. That's, you know, something that we all work on. Don't feel bad. You know, it's practice. But for me, it was the mental health side of it that suddenly went, yeah, I can understand if you're not comfortable doing this. You know, you don't want to make it anxious. So again, revert back to your content pillars, revert back to perhaps, you know, things that you could talk about. If being on camera is going to make you anxious, you know, do a blog.
Yeah, do that. Or, you know, if you get invited to do something, if you don't want to do an interview like this, you know, then you can do a podcast with audio. You know, there's lots of different ways to do it. Or, you know, quite often people do interviews just as a text thing, send you an email with questions, you send them back, and then it's done as a blog, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's lots of different ways to approach it without feeling, oh, I'm going to be on, I'm going to be on TV, or I'm going to be on the radio, or, or I'm going to be in this like magazine that goes out to millions of people with my face plastered all over it. If you're not comfortable doing that, then start small. And I think you're right. I think the more you start doing little bits and pieces, sort of stretching yourself outside your comfort zone each time, it starts getting easier and easier to do more different things as well and get yourself out there.
And actually, that then goes back into the story, because what I would say is that you could be pitching for like those big titles. It's easy to do, and they do want to hear from small businesses. So it's becoming a lot more accessible, which is great. The opportunities are there, but like doing things like a community magazine feature, like I've just done one myself, and it's like great to go, wow, like we forget that, like who's in my own community and how can I get there? Or maybe who's the local podcast, or or just even industry. Like there's so many steps. As I always say, there's 5 spheres of influence before you even get to like mass media. So what could you be working on in that side, building up your story, building up your success, so that by the time it comes to those opportunities, and if you don't search for them, sometimes they will find you, then you've got more of a story to tell, and it's proven. Like I think that's the other thing, is that you're not the person that's like imposter syndrome, oh my god, I've got so and so, it's an opportunity, where some of the mindset monkeys might come in. If you're an extroverted person that's more than happy to take up the opportunity, fantastic. But there's some of us that might be feeling, hang on a second, oh my god, this is this is a huge opportunity, I don't want to make a mistake. And it's like, no, they're calling you for a reason. You always know your business so much more than anyone else. You are absolutely captain and master of that ship. So therefore, there is definitely value why anybody would want to speak to you. It's just really making sure that if you're feeling a little bit vulnerable at the time, how do you balance it? And I feel like, there's plenty that you could be doing on your business, rather than just focusing on rushing to do personal branding, as it were, personal PR, trying to do these stories and features where your face is on there. And whether or not it actually makes sure that it is actually relating to your business.
Yeah, and there will, I think sometimes people think, oh, what about the comeback, or people won't agree with me, and it's fine. Well, they're not part of the audience. There's always going to be people who are cheering behind you and are sort of drawn towards what you do, because what someone always said to me, about being an expert, and how can you be an expert in what you do, but that you are unique, therefore you are the expert, because you're the only person who does that. So you're an expert in what you do. So if you approach it from that point of view, I've always kind of had that mantra in my mind that actually you're the only one who does what you do the way that you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much value in sort of like how you've learnt that, what you've discovered, how you've tailored your craft, your services, your business because of that. Like again, there's a big story there, and it's not to shy away from it, but it's just really making sure so that there's lots in there. But the reason it's more relevant is because as somebody, as a business owner, I want to hear what you've done to help me.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll understand that from a viewpoint. So again, when there's a bigger feature at play and they need a comment or they need an expert, your viewpoint and your insights will help somebody that goes, oh, somebody understands what I'm going through. So not to shy away from it, but definitely understanding that there is almost I think you get a lot of people, again, I just see the words PR yourself like a celebrity, and I'm like, oh, is that sort of like a Z-list celebrity? Or, if you're thinking of yourself as Richard Branson, he had stuff to shout about. It was all about the business.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of money and the team behind him, and, all sorts of things. So, yeah, I think that'll just put the pressure on people. So, yeah, definitely.
There are definitely ways to do it. Brilliant. Oh, well, hopefully that's been good for you to chat through, giving you some insights. Of course, ask any questions that you may have, and we'll go into the comments. But I think that sums up that topic quite nicely in ways that you might not have considered. Yeah, brilliant.
I'm sure there'll be questions that pop up, but yeah, by all means, pop them in either on Christelle's page or mine, and we'll get back. Yeah. Christelle will get back to you. She's the PR expert, so.
I hope you're all rested. I was about to say we had a week off, but we're back into it now. So yes, it's been lovely to have that break.
Yeah, well, nice Easter break, and then we've got a guest on next week, haven't we?
We have, yep. So we're back into it. So wonderful. We'll have Jill. Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent.
Looking forward to that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Bye.